You think you know the person who sleeps next to you every night. You believe in the business trips, the neatly framed family photos, the promises of forever. Until one day you walk into a photo studio and a woman in a red dress identical to yours turns around and smiles. She's his wife too. Today's story is a masterclass in deception. 2 families in 2 different states, 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, all seemingly perfect, except for one thing. The woman standing in the picture. I used to think I knew the man I married. He wasn't perfect, forgot birthdays, sometimes sent our son to school wearing mismatched socks, but he loved me. Or at least I believed that long enough for it to become the foundation of everything else. That morning started like any other. I confirmed our Christmas photo shoot appointment, packed 3 outfits in red and cream that I'd carefully coordinated all week. Timmy, our son, whined about the bow tie. Ethan, my husband, just laughed. "It's just a few pictures, babe. Don't overthink it. Just a few pictures." If I had known what was coming, I wouldn't have gone. The studio was nestled on a quiet street in suburban Columbus, scented with pine wood and playing soft Christmas music. I arrived 10 minutes early because I'm always early. I keep the rhythm. I stepped inside, holding Timmy's hand, and smiled at the front desk girl in a reindeer sweater. "Hi, Mrs. Carter-Wright," she said brightly. I nodded. "Yes. We booked the 10 a.m. family session." She frowned at her screen, tilting her head. "Huh. That's weird. There are 2 Mrs. Carters this morning. Same happy family package, same red snow backdrop. Booked 15 minutes apart." She laughed. "Maybe your sisters-in-law," I laughed too mechanically, but something skipped in my chest. "No worries," I said. "Probably just a name mix-up." She nodded. "Happens with the Carters all the time, right?" I was about to respond when the back door opened. A woman stepped out from the dressing room holding the hand of a little girl around 6. I turned and froze. She wore a red knit dress with white trim identical to the one in my bag, brown shoulder-length hair with soft curls, beige leather flats. Her features weren't mine, but her walk, the way she carried herself, was hauntingly familiar. Then her eyes met mine. I don't know why I asked, but I did. "Are you Mrs. Carter too?" She hesitated, then smiled politely. "Yes. My husband books our Christmas photos every year. It's tradition." I swallowed hard. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, that Ethan couldn't no way, but the puzzle pieces started trembling in my head all the late nights, all the urgent weekends at the Chicago branch. A branch I'd never seen. Timmy tugged my arm. "Mommy, why are you so quiet?" I smiled stiffly. "It's nothing, honey. Just waiting our turn." The receptionist looked back. "Are you Mrs. Carter number 1 or 2? I didn't answer, because just then Ethan stepped out of the studio. White shirt, red tie, 2 cups of hot cocoa in his hands. He saw me, then her, and the color drained from his face. She followed his gaze, turned around, and I knew in that single breathless moment, all 3 of us knew. This wasn't a mix-up. This wasn't 2 bookings. This was one man, 2 families, and we had just collided. If you looked at our wedding photo, you'd probably see a happy couple. He's in a navy suit. I'm in an ivory satin gown, our eyes locked under a burst of confetti. It was a perfectly timed shot, but I've always believed not every framed moment is real. We lived in a quiet town north of Columbus, in a 2-story house with a flower-filled porch and a doorbell that always rang slightly offbeat. Ethan worked as a regional manager for a logistics firm. I freelanced from home. Our son Timmy is 6 this year, loves Legos, and is afraid of the dark. Every morning Ethan woke up before me and brewed my coffee light milk, no sugar. He drove Timmy to school, gave me space to work. On weekends he'd wash the car himself, sometimes even did my laundry. He wasn't the type to propose with diamonds hidden in wine glasses. He was the kind who remembered the pediatrician's name, who told me to wear a jacket when it was windy. A kind man. And it's men like him who, when something goes wrong, you don't notice it right away, because they know how to make you feel loved just enough to stay. It started small. Ethan began traveling more. Just a few days, he said the first time back in February last year. There's a warehouse issue at our Oregon branch. Oregon over 2,000 miles away. I didn't question it. I was used to him being busy. I was even a little proud. My husband was in demand, but then the trips kept coming, and something about them was too similar. Same hotel, same duration, same angle of photo him by the window posted at exactly 9:07 p.m. on Wednesdays. I joked once, "Why are you always at that exact spot?" He smiled and handed me his phone. "I like the lighting here. Looks okay, right?" I nodded, but something inside me didn't. Then came FaceTime. I once asked if he could video chat so Timmy could say goodnight. Ethan declined. "Hotel Wi-Fi's awful," he said, "and the room's kind of a mess." I felt a pang but didn't push. We were the kind of couple that respected each other's space. Or, at least I thought so. Last Christmas, Ethan came home late. The cake I'd ordered had melted. Timmy sat on the couch wearing his dad's favorite gift sweater, already asleep. I called Ethan at 7:30 p.m. "I'm stuck in Denver," he said. "Snowstorm. Flights delayed, probably won't make it home until tomorrow." I checked the weather. Clear skies. I texted back, "It's okay, just get home safe." I was always the one who texted first. The one who swept the silence clean. The one who made excuses for every crack with love, with reason, with patience. One night I called him near midnight. Timmy had a high fever. I just wanted to hear Ethan's voice. He picked up after 4 rings. There was music in the background. Soft laughter, a woman's voice. "I'm still at the office," he said quickly. "Team's still working." "Office? With music?" I asked. 1 second of pause, then he chuckled. "Yeah, the younger team likes to chill out after meetings. Don't worry, babe." I hung up. I didn't cry, but I sat in the dark for a long time. The house still looked the same familiar, but it no longer felt like a home, more like a stage, and I couldn't tell if I was the lead or just a stand-in. Still I kept going, for our son, for the lack of proof, for the hope that I was just imagining things. Because if what I feared was true, then everything I'd ever called family had no name anymore. And maybe Ethan knew that. Maybe he knew I wouldn't be the first to doubt. But what he didn't know was that in another state there was another woman. Also staring at photos that looked too perfect. Also starting to wonder if she was standing at the edge of someone else's story. I used to think that if I were ever betrayed, it would hit like lightning, a suspicious text, an earring under the pillow, a nervous glance. But the truth didn't come like thunder. It came slowly in small pieces, a receipt here, a photo there, each harmless on its own, until the picture they formed became undeniable. After that morning at the photo studio, I didn't say anything to Ethan. I came home, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, opened my laptop, and did nothing. Timmy napped on the couch, cheeks flushed, hair messy, and I stared at him wondering, is my son part of the real life, or just a copy of a story being lived somewhere else? I started small. I looked up the Mrs. Carter bookings on the studio's system. They didn't ask for ID, and there it was, 2 identical names. Same family package, same red snowflake backdrop, 17 minutes apart, one in Columbus, Ohio, the other in Eugene, Oregon. I created a fake email and messaged the studio as a curious customer. "Hi, I heard Mrs. Carter in Oregon did a similar shoot last year. Any chance you have sample photos?" 3 hours later, they replied with a few examples. I opened the file and felt my heart seize in my chest. A man in a red sweater holding a little girl next to a brunette with familiar eyes. It wasn't me, but the sweater, the exact one I washed every winter, was unmistakable. I pulled out our old Christmas album. Same pose, same white tree, same placement of his hands behind his back like a signature habit. I dug deeper. The credit card Ethan told me he only used for work flights had charges from a bakery in Eugene, last April. That was Timmy's birthday. But we didn't have cake that day. I had the flu, and Ethan said he didn't have time to stop anywhere. I went to Facebook. Ethan barely posted. But she did. The woman from the studio, her profile was public. I scrolled. A photo from December 24th, another Christmas together. Feels like the first. Ethan in a white shirt, red tie, holding a gift, smiling like a man with nothing to hide. I kept scrolling. Her daughter's birthday, a family dinner, a trip to a national park, just daddy and his girl. I didn't know the child's name. But her smile, it chilled me, because it looked just like Timmy's. I saved everything. Photos, receipts, screenshots, not to confront him, but to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, that the cracks I'd felt were real. Then one day I got an email from Timmy's school, a reminder about the upcoming parent-teacher Zoom meeting. I logged in early, brushed my hair. The display name read, Mrs. Carter. There were already 3 people online, the teacher, another parent, and then another camera turned on. Her. She'd logged in too. Same name, Mrs. Carter. We both froze. Neither of us said a word. She looked at me. I looked at her. And in that moment, we both knew. No more wondering. No more maybe. Just quiet, cold confirmation. The teacher started talking, unaware of the uncanny overlap. But I couldn't hear a word. My ears buzzed with pressure like my body was trying to reject what it already knew. On the screen, 2 women. Same name, same school, same man. 2 lives running in parallel, carefully curated, perfectly replicated. One wife might forgive, but 2 women discovering the lie at the same time. That's not forgiveness. That's the beginning of reckoning. Our second meeting wasn't by chance. I sent her a message from an anonymous account, just 4 words, "We need to talk." Attached was a screenshot from the Zoom parent-teacher meeting, where 2 rectangles sat side by side, both labeled Mrs. Carter. She replied 3 minutes later, when and where. We chose a quiet cafe halfway between Columbus and the airport, the same airport Ethan always said he was flying out from. Neither of us wore makeup. We both came in dark coats and flat shoes, eyes cautious but not hostile. There were no tears, no shattered cups, no dramatic shouting like in the movies. Only silence. She sat across from me, and for a strange moment, I saw myself in her, not in her face, but in the tight pull at the corners of her mouth, the way she wrapped both hands around her coffee like she was holding together something far more fragile than porcelain. He told me, she began, that the travel was exhausting, that he hated flying, but he did it for our future. I nodded. He told me that too, said he despised hotel rooms. She gave a dry laugh. Funny. I have an entire Christmas photo set he took in a hotel suite. I opened my bag and laid down a folder, receipts, screenshots, photos, neatly printed and arranged. She did the same. We placed the files side by side. At a glance, they looked like copies. But if you looked closer, you'd see the differences. 2 children, 2 cities, 2 lives, last Valentine's Day. I said quietly, "He gave me a book." Inside, he wrote, "Thank you for being my home." She looked up. He gave me the same book. His note said, "Thank you for being my peace." We sat in silence again. Then came the holidays. Thanksgivings missed due to flight cancellations, Christmases celebrated late because of emergency meetings, birthdays postponed due to client dinners. She pulled out a photo. "This is my daughter with him last Christmas." He told me we were the only family he had. I said nothing. I simply pulled up the photo of Timmy, also with Ethan's same date. Only the tree was different. That was when I understood the betrayal wasn't just in the lies. It was in how everything I thought was mine was just a script he'd already performed. We didn't need to ask each other what came next. We already knew. She looked at me. "I don't want to destroy him." "Neither do I said. "I just want the lights turned on. So he can't hide anymore. We didn't want revenge. We didn't want to tear lives apart. We just wanted one truth, that he no longer owned the narrative." So we made a plan. Ethan's 40th birthday was approaching, the one he turned into a personal brand every year. Hotel ballroom, professional photographer, engraved invitations, dozens of guests, a night to celebrate family and legacy. We wouldn't RSVP. We wouldn't warn him. We would simply walk in at the same time and wait to see this time who Ethan would look toward, or perhaps more fittingly, to see the moment he realizes there's no one left still willing to look back. Ethan threw himself a 40th birthday party, or rather a perfectly staged performance disguised as gratitude. Leighton Grand Hotel, private ballroom, soft amber lighting, cinnamon-scented candles, embossed invitations glittering with the words, "Celebrating Legacy, Love, and Leadership." A live jazz band played near the stage. A professional photographer moved discreetly between the guests. A large sign near the entrance read, family is where the journey begins. Everyone was there. Co-workers, relatives, old classmates, people who had heard Ethan speak often and glowingly of his amazing wife. What they didn't know was he had two. I entered from the left side of the ballroom just as the MC began his opening remarks. She, the other woman, came in from the right holding tightly to her daughter's hand. No one noticed us at first. All eyes were still on the stage. Ethan stood there glowing as always, one hand on Timmy's shoulder, clad in a pale gray suit, smiling like a man who truly had it all. Until Timmy tugged his sleeve and asked Dad, "Why is my mom over there?" Ethan froze. He turned, following his son's finger. And in that moment, time fractured. At opposite ends of the room stood two women, two children, two pairs of eyes, and the same heavy silence. The band stopped playing. The MC hesitated, glancing toward Ethan for direction. But Ethan said nothing. He took one step back, then another, his gaze flicking wildly between me, her, and the two children now holding hands in confusion. A guest near the front whispered, "Who is that?" Another murmured, "His wife." But which one? And then, like a final thread snapping, the whispers began to ripple through the room. I didn't step forward, neither did she. We stayed where we were, two living witnesses to a truth no one could now deny. Ethan stammered, let me explain." But no one responded. Not because we were angry, but because every word he'd built his life on now sounded weightless. A woman near the back discreetly tucked her phone away, ending a recording. An older man, Ethan's former boss, nodded slowly, as if he was finally piecing together all the vague hints he'd ignored. And I thought he wasn't crumbling because he'd been caught. He was crumbling because, for the first time, no one believed the story anymore. The other woman turned to me. We met eyes. No bitterness, no pain. Only something calm and devastating recognition. We were no longer two mistaken strangers. We were the truth. Unerasable, undeniable. Ethan turned toward me, then toward her, eyes wide, pleading, lost, like a boy at a train station who suddenly realizes the train has left without him. He opened his mouth to say something again. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't mean to. But nothing came. Just scraps of breath caught in his throat. He bent slightly and placed his wine glass on the table nearby unevenly. The glass tipped, tilted, then fell, landing on the carpet with a soft but unmistakable thud. No one moved to pick it up. No one stepped in to smooth over his shame. Ethan stepped backward, bumping into the floral centerpiece behind him. A single white petal drifted onto his suit jacket, fragile, fading like the last bit of faith he'd once been wrapped in. He lifted his foot as if to leave, but he didn't move. The room, the lights, the murmurs, all seemed to slow around him. And he remained completely still. A child giggled in a far corner, unaware. A spoon clinked against porcelain. Somewhere a door creaked open. Ethan turned toward the sound, not to escape, but as if wondering, if I walk out that door, what's left of me. I don't know what he felt in that moment. Maybe regret for being exposed. Maybe sorrow for having once loved truly one of us. But I know this much. He never imagined both of us would show up. He never imagined we'd stand side by side, not against each other. And he never imagined his undoing would come not from screaming, but from silence. From one look. From the stillness of truth, finally standing upright in the middle of a room that used to clap when he spoke. We didn't become friends. There were no cozy coffee dates, no promises to stay in touch. After that night, we each returned to our own lives, quiet, independent, and no longer carrying any pieces that didn't belong to us. But sometimes a message would arrive unprompted, unplanned. Timmy's loving swim class. "Has your little one started yet? She's teething and a bit feverish. Do you remember what worked for your son? Not long, not sentimental. Just simple exchanges between two mothers, women who had walked through the same storm and made it out." We never mentioned Ethan again. We no longer checked his profile, no longer wondered where he'd gone, what he was doing, or who, if anyone, was still standing beside him. That silence wasn't bitterness. It was a choice to protect the part of our lives we had finally decided to keep for ourselves. I moved. Not far, but far enough to change a zip code, a morning routine, a street to school. She returned to her old job, the one she had once left to focus on family. We didn't say it out loud, but we both knew some wounds don't need apologies to heal. They just need time, space, and clarity. One day I got a photo, no message. It was her daughter standing by a window holding a book titled Where Things Begin Again. I smiled and sent back a picture of Timmy drawing with crooked handwriting across the top, "Our home." We didn't share much. We didn't need to relive it all. We had walked through the darkest part of a shared story, and somehow that made us more than survivors. Ethan once believed that as long as he divided his time, his affection, his words, no one would ever notice they were being deceived. But what he forgot was this. Once women cross paths, the truth stops being something you can hide. And in the end, we were no longer the women he deceived. We were the ones who stood together when everything else fell away. And what about you? Have you ever stood in a room where the truth walked in and no one could look away? Have you ever believed you were the only one, only to discover you were just half of a carefully divided lie? And if you were the woman in this story, would you walk away, or would you stay and face it? Leave a comment below. You don't have to tell the whole story. Sometimes just one sentence, "I've been there," is enough. We don't have to know each other to understand each other. Sometimes simply knowing someone else survived the same storm is all it takes to feel less alone.